guys, welcome to Amity Tracks, and welcome to another episode of Albums That Should Have Been. So, if you remember, we've done one of these so far. I've got a whole list of them I can do in the future if you guys enjoy this kind of thing. I, uh, I've always played this game in my mind. Probably a lot of you guys have too. So, it's this alternate universe where, we can look back in hindsight and say, this album should have been changed or altered, or an album that should have been created, right? From it can be anything from, you take tracks that were recorded in a certain time period, but, maybe they were put together and then shelved and then reappeared later. It's like what happens with Neil Young a lot, on, interspersed on future albums, but maybe that original album should have been put out, or a double that should have been boiled down to a single. If you watched our first episode of this series, I took Bruce Springsteen's Lucky Town and Human Touch that were both released in 1992. And I think everybody, including Springsteen, acknowledges, yeah, maybe that should have just been one record. So we did it. We boiled it down to one album and made a much stronger album. So yeah, so these are these albums that should have been, as the title suggests. So this episode, we're gonna hit one that I've had in my mind forever, and it's just like I get angry about it sometimes. Like, this really should have been an album. Why didn't they do this? So this is looking at the Grateful Dead in 1972. So a little background here. So 1972, Warner Brothers, the Dead's label, made a very kind of unique, interesting, or somewhat unique, interesting deal with the band. I'm assuming it was in renegotiating contract or something. But anyway, made a deal with the band that stipulated that each member of the Dead, if they wanted to, could put out a solo album on the Warner Brothers label. Warner Brothers would do it. Well, three of the band members took Warner's up on their offer: Jerry Garcia, Bob Weir, and Mickey Hart. Now, Mickey Hart, by the time his record came out, he had left the Dead, obviously temporarily, because he will come back a little bit later. But his album, I think by the time it came out, he was not in the Dead anymore. But he had been part of that contract. So the rest of the guys didn't take Warner's up on the offer. And so you basically have solo debuts from three of these members. You have Jerry Garcia's Garcia, and you have Bob Weir's Ace, and then you have Mickey Hart's Rolling Thunder. Now, I do have that on CD. I don't have that on vinyl, and I didn't feel like digging through because I have the editor who can just very conveniently flash up a picture of Rolling Thunder. And we're not going to really be dealing with Rolling Thunder all that much anyway in this scenario. So those three were released. Okay. Now, songs at least from Jerry Garcia's album and Bob Weir's album very quickly became just, staples in the Grateful Dead's, set lists for decades after. And, for all intents and purposes, I think most Dead fans, including me, at least these two, and maybe even Mickey Hart's record, consider these to basically just be part of the Grateful Dead's repertoire. And in Bob Weir's case, his backing band was the rest of the Dead. So I mean, this really was a Grateful Dead album, and everything but name only. If it were just a Dead album that comprised of just Bob Weir songs, it was basically a Grateful Dead album. Now, the Jerry Garcia record, he almost kind of a one-man band thing. He played almost all the instruments by himself. I do believe that he got Bill Kreutzmann in to do some drums, from the Dead, one of the Dead's drummers. But other than that, it was Garcia, really kind of a solo deal. But like I said, these two albums especially are often just considered, by fans as going to be extensions of the Dead, part of the discography. But technically speaking, They are solo albums. So you know where this is leading, because you know the theme of this series, right? The album that should have been, we are going to construct, instead of these solo ventures, the next, what should have been just the next Grateful Dead album made from the best songs from these two. Now, I'm not pulling stuff from Mickey Hart's record. A couple reasons. One, like I said, it was technically released when he was out of the band, and so it doesn't make sense that it would be on the next Dead out. And two, I know I know Rolling Thunder has a lot of has its fans. I'm not a huge fan of it. Now, I love these two, but I'm not a huge fan of Mickey Hart's record. So I don't know. So here's what we're gonna do: we're gonna boil these two down into a single album, and it'll be the next Grateful Dead album, because, as you know, the vast majority of Grateful Dead songs were sung by Bob Weir and Jerry Garcia, right? So you put these together, mash them up, and you've got what I think would have been one of the greatest Grateful Dead albums ever. So let's do it. What are we going to call this? Well, let's see. This is called Garcia, and this is called Ace. Garcia's Ace, Jerry's Ace. I don't know. We're just going to call it Garcia's Ace. All right, Garcia's Ace. Okay, so there we go. That's what we're going to call it. So what are the rules here? Just kind of looking at my rules here. Like I said, we're going to make a single album. So we're going to kind of boil it down. Now, I'm going to stick to reality here. So it has to, time-wise, it has to fit on a typical slab of vinyl, right? Which you've got about 15 to 22 minutes typically on each side of a vinyl record. So in what I have created here would fit, those time parameters. It's a little tougher doing, a new vinyl record versus a CD, because you got to deal with the time constraints on each side. But we're doing it. Because the rule was, with the Springsteen it was a little easier because it was in the 90s, so it was the CD era. So I made a CD. But here we got to deal with vinyl. This is 1972. So that, if we're doing this experiment, it's got to fit on one record, and two sides of a record. Okay. So here's what I came up with. Now, I think Ace this is a 5-star record for me. I love Bob Weir's Ace, and pretty almost every single song, almost. Walk in the Sunshine, maybe. I don't know. Almost every one of these songs became kind of like Dead standards anyway. Now, Jerry Garcia's record is a little more interesting. He kind of gets into some avant-garde experimentation a little bit. Kind of really gets out there. He has since, after this kind of said, maybe I was a little too excessive on there. But I think about half of this are like great, just straight up songs, and the other half are kind of these sound experiments. But the song half are much like We're, like top notch, and a lot of, a ton of these songs ended up on, in Grateful Dead set lists and live albums and all that. So that's kind of what we're working with here. So I've got a 9-song album, and here is the order. Editor got on me last time because he said I didn't scoot over enough to give him room to list the song there. How's that? That's a lot of room. I mean, if you can't work with that, you're an idiot. Anyway, side 1. So we're gonna open up side 1 with Deal from the Garcia album. Then we're in the 2 slot. We're gonna come right in with Black Throated Wind from Ace. We're gonna stick with Ace in the 3 slot. Gonna really rock it out with One More Saturday Night. All right. We're gonna stick with Ace again. In the 4 slot, kind of slow it down. One of those real nice folky numbers with Cassidy. All right, from Ace. And then we're going to wrap up side 1 with Sugary from Garcia. All right. That's a nice side of vinyl right there, guys. Side two. You gotta open a side with, I don't know. In my view, I think you gotta open a side with this. Either open or close. It's gotta be in one of those primo slots. But we're gonna open side two with Playing in the Band from Ace. Now, this song's interesting. Playing in the Band, of course, became a real dead standard where they improvised the hell out of it. It's kind of interesting. So Playing in the Band appeared on Skull and Roses, or officially Grateful Dead, from '71. A live version, because it's a live album, so a live version on here. It also appeared on Rolling Thunder, Mickey Hart's record, and it shows up on Bob Weir's record. So they obviously thought a lot of that song. But my favorite version, and I'm including, I know this is blasphemy to a lot of Deadheads, but I don't really consider myself a Deadhead, although I do consider myself a big fan of the band. I do love the Grateful Dead, but I don't put myself on that high pedestal. My favorite version of that song, and I'm including a bunch of live versions I've heard, is the studio version of Playing in the Band from Ace. I think that is, I mean, they improvise the hell out of it. There's a lot of great improvisation, but it's still kind of tight enough, and I think it's awesome. So anyway, open it up side two with Playing in the Band from Ace. Then we're going to finish out side two with Jerry Garcia songs. So in the two slot on side two is Loser from Garcia. Then really slow it down, make it beautiful with To Lay Me Down from Garcia. And then we're going to close side two with one of, I love this song. I don't remember them, at least in my knowledge, I don't remember the Grateful Dead ever pulling this out in shows and stuff, but I think it's gorgeous. It shows Jerry Garcia's wonderful experimentation with the pedal steel guitar. We're during this era, he was playing pedal steel a lot, and he played on a lot of other people's records, Neil Young's records, David Crosby's records, CSN records, Jefferson Airplane records, Dead records. And then he stopped playing the pedal steel, and I wish he hadn't, because a great pedal steel player. Anyway, this is one of my favorite songs with that pedal steel in it, and it's The Wheel. So we're going to close the album with The Wheel from Garcia, which also closes Garcia as well. It's just a great closer, beautiful closer. So that's it. All right, so Deal, Black Throated Wind, One More Saturday Night, Cassidy, Sugaree, and then side two is Playing in the Band, Loser, To Lay Me Down, The Wheel. Man, look at that. That is a 5-star album. That would have been, if they just done that, that would have been, I think, one of the great Grateful Dead albums. Now, I had to cut some great songs. I mean, if you're familiar with these other songs, and again, I had to stay within the time constraints. So we got to play the game by the rules. So I didn't have room for Bird Song from Garcia, which is great. And then a whole host of tunes from Ace, right? Greatest Story Ever Told, Walk in the Sunshine, Feels Like Rain, which kills me to leave that off, and Mexicali Blues. All those had to be left off. But again, in our alternative universe here, we still have those songs to work with. So maybe the next album, could have included some of those tunes. We'll assume that those songs will be released to the world at some point, maybe on the next record. But anyway, yeah. So I mean, just imagine, that really would have, I think, created a more consistent studio story, at least for the Grateful Dead, because it really would have followed nicely, because you have these two masterpieces here, right? Working Man's Dead and then American Beauty. And then, of course, those were followed by Skull and Roses or Grateful Dead, which is live, but a bunch of newer material. So, this album, as most Dead fans know, sort of works almost as a studio album because it's presenting a lot of newer stuff. Great album art, right? And then, so in our fantasy universe, right after this would have come our new, what do we say? Garcia's Ace, Jerry's Ace, whatever we want to call it. That would have come right after Skull and Roses. Whew. Man, what a string of albums that would have been. Anyway, what do you guys think? You think I'm crazy? Would you just leave Garcia and Ace as it is? If you want to play the game, how would you create the next Grateful Dead album from the tracks that were available, that they were working with at the time? What do you guys think? Let's talk Grateful Dead. All right. Please do subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Hit the bell for notifications. Like the videos. All of that stuff really helps. And we'll see you next time on Amity Tracks.